Ethan Cole was a decorated war veteran, a man who carried the battlefield in his eyes and faith in his heart. But one winter in Denver, the city he served turned against him. Branded a murderer and sentenced to die, Ethan's only witness to the truth was his loyal German shepherd, Rex. When the prison door closed, something greater opened. Destiny. Rex's howl in the snow would awaken a chain of miracles no court could silence. A fearless detective, a storm that erased all tracks, and a secret born from man's attempt to play God. In a world of masks and lies, one soldier and his dog would prove that faith doesn't need eyes to see, only the courage to believe. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. The winter storm pressed against the city of Denver like a living thing, its breath cold and relentless. Snow blurred the edges of buildings, muffling sirens and footsteps alike, turning every streetlight into a ghostly halo. Beneath that frozen haze walked a man who looked carved from the same stone as the mountains beyond. Ethan Cole, 38, a veteran of Afghanistan, once a medic in the 3rd Infantry. His face carried the memory of war, a scar down the left cheek, eyes gray and watchful, and the kind of quiet that only men who've seen too much can wear. He had a soldier's gait, measured, deliberate, as if every step still counted. The war had left him with nightmares, and worse, the habit of listening for danger even in silence. Beside him trotted Rex, a 7-year-old German shepherd, large and powerful with tan and black fur and eyes of molten amber. Once a K9 partner in the army, Rex bore a faint white streak over his muzzle, the mark of shrapnel. The dog moved in perfect rhythm with his master, protective but calm, sensing Ethan's every thought before it was spoken. Ethan had returned to Denver 2 years ago, seeking peace and anonymity after the battlefield. But peace, as he had learned, was just another form of waiting. He found work as a mechanic in a small garage owned by Harold Jennings, a gruff but decent man in his 50s, heavy-set, with tobacco-stained fingers and a loyalty that showed in small acts. An extra sandwich left on the workbench, a wordless nod at the end of the day. Harold didn't ask about Ethan's past, and Ethan didn't talk about it. The only sound that filled the shop most days was the hum of engines and Rex's low breathing beside the heater. One gray morning, Ethan arrived at the garage to find police cars lining the block. Flashing blue lights painted the snow. 2 officers stood by the door, their expressions cold. Behind them, the city's crime scene unit moved with mechanical precision. Ethan's stomach sank before anyone spoke. "Ethan Cole?" a detective asked. Detective Marcus Leary, a tall man with short-cropped blonde hair, immaculate suit, and a voice as smooth as glass. "You're under arrest for the murder of Mason Clark." Ethan blinked, unable to process the words. Mason Clark, the wealthy contractor who owned half the real estate on the north side, had hired Ethan once to repair his SUV. Now Mason was dead, stabbed in his penthouse, and the weapon bore Ethan's prints. Rex barked sharply as officers grabbed Ethan's wrists. "There's been a mistake," Ethan said, voice steady but trembling under the calm. "I don't know anything about—" He stopped when he saw the evidence bag held up before him, his army knife, blood still fresh. His mind raced. He had lost that knife weeks ago. Someone had been in his apartment. Someone wanted him gone. At the trial, the courtroom was packed. Snow fell against the high windows like ash. Ethan sat in his uniform jacket, the same he'd worn at his discharge, while prosecutors painted him as a bitter soldier turned violent. They had footage of a man entering Mason's building wearing Ethan's face. Every detail was perfect. Gait, gestures, even his voice on the security logs. But deep down, Ethan knew. This was no ordinary setup. The world he thought he'd left behind, the Black Ops experiments, the whispers of synthetic disguises used in covert missions, had followed him home. Rex wasn't allowed inside the courtroom, but when the sentence was read, death by lethal injection, the dog howled from the hallway, a raw, aching sound that froze everyone in their seats. Even Judge Sarah Lowell, a composed woman in her 60s with silver hair and stern eyes, paused for a heartbeat before finishing the verdict. Ethan lowered his gaze, jaw tight, eyes burning not with fear but disbelief. It wasn't death he feared. It was dying for something he hadn't done. As the guards let him out, snowflakes drifted through the open doors, landing on his shackled hands. Through the blur, he saw Rex straining against his leash, held by an officer outside. "Easy, boy," Ethan whispered, voice cracking. Rex's eyes met his, bright and desperate, and Ethan swore he saw understanding there, not animal instinct, but promise. In the holding cell that night, Ethan couldn't sleep. His cellmate snored, and the fluorescent light flickered. He thought of the war, the desert, the screams, the nights he and Rex survived when others didn't. Every scar had a story, and every story was a debt. Now this, the final chapter written by someone else's hand. He remembered Mason's last words months ago, during a tense argument about a mysterious shipment from overseas. "If they come for me, they'll come for you too." At the time, Ethan had brushed it off as paranoia. Now it sounded like prophecy. Meanwhile, across the city, snow thickened over the Denver skyline. At the precinct, Detective Claire Monroe reviewed the case file. She was 35, slender, with auburn hair tied loosely at the nape, freckles faint against pale skin. A former behavioral analyst turned detective, Claire was known for her empathy and her refusal to accept easy answers. Her father, a police officer, had died in a cover-up 15 years ago, teaching her one truth: not all crimes end when the gavel falls. She stared at Ethan's mugshot. Something in his eyes unsettled her. Not guilt, not rage, something quieter. Resolve. The next morning, Claire stood at the kennel where Rex had been transferred after the sentencing. The dog refused food, his fur dull, eyes fixed on the door. The handler sighed. "He's useless now," he said. "Won't obey, won't eat." Claire knelt by the cage. "Hey, soldier," she whispered. Rex lifted his head slightly. When she spoke Ethan's name, he stood, ears alert, tail still. Claire's pulse quickened. Dogs don't fake emotion. She looked into those amber eyes and saw not loss, but direction. The kind of focus only a loyal companion could hold. Outside, the snow began again, thick and heavy, as if the heavens themselves were burying the city under silence. Claire signed the transfer papers. Somewhere deep inside, Rex barked once, a low, determined sound that echoed through the corridor. The kind of sound that meant a story wasn't over yet. The snow in Denver had turned to a gray slush by morning, but the air still bit like steel. Detective Claire Monroe stood in the narrow alley behind the precinct, holding Rex's leash as the German shepherd sniffed the frozen ground. The dog moved with sharp intent, head low, tail stiff, tracing scents that humans could never perceive. His breath steamed in the cold, mixing with the soft hum of passing traffic. Claire, bundled in a thick navy coat, watched him with cautious wonder. She had never worked with a dog before, especially one with eyes that seemed to think. "Easy, soldier," she murmured, her breath forming clouds in the air. Rex paused, ears twitching toward the faint echo of sirens downtown. Somewhere in that sound, Claire thought she saw what the dog felt: loss, confusion, but also purpose. She knelt to his level. "We'll find out what happened to him. I promise." The promise wasn't just to Ethan, it was to herself. Claire's curiosity had grown overnight. The evidence in Ethan Cole's case was airtight, too airtight. Every timestamp, every fingerprint, every strand of DNA matched perfectly, like something assembled in a lab. Years in the department had taught her one thing: the truth rarely fits so cleanly. She entered the precinct, Rex padding silently beside her, drawing stares. Officer Liam O'Connor, a young Irish-American rookie with sandy hair and boyish freckles, stopped mid-conversation. "You're walking that dog," he said, surprised. Claire gave him a flat look. "He's evidence," she replied curtly. Liam shrugged, but admiration flickered in his eyes. He'd grown up idolizing K-9 heroes. "Be careful, ma'am," he added. "They say that dog won't follow anyone but the dead man." Claire didn't respond. She took the elevator to the evidence floor, where boxes of case files lined the walls like tombs. Sitting at a terminal, she opened the footage from the night Mason Clark was killed. The grainy video showed a man, Ethan's height, Ethan's walk, entering the building. But as she slowed the frames, something felt off. The reflection in a glass door showed the man's face flicker for less than a second, like a glitch in a digital feed. She froze the frame, leaned closer, her pulse quickening. "What are you hiding?" she whispered. Rex let out a low growl, his hackles rising. The door creaked open behind her. It was Captain Howard Briggs, head of homicide. Briggs was in his late 50s, tall but stooped, his hair thinning to silver. His lined face and steady brown eyes gave the impression of a man carved from patience and exhaustion. He had once been Claire's mentor, the only one who believed in her after her father's death. "Monroe," he said, voice gravelly from decades of cigarettes. "I heard you took in Cole's mutt. Don't get too attached. That case is closed." Claire glanced at him. "You ever see evidence too perfect, Captain?" Briggs sighed, rubbing his Stetson temples. "Every damn day. But that doesn't make it wrong." He hesitated, softer now. "You're a good detective, Claire. Don't dig yourself into another grave." She understood what he meant. Her father's obsession with corruption had cost him his life. But that only made her resolve stronger. That night, Claire brought Rex to her apartment, a small, cluttered space on the 4th floor of a red brick building. The room smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. She dropped her coat over the chair, poured Rex a bowl of water, and sat at her desk. The snow outside thickened, covering the city in quiet isolation. On her computer screen, she cross-referenced Mason Clark's phone records. Several unknown numbers appeared in the days before his death, each linked to an untraceable prepaid line. One name kept surfacing in old financial ledgers: Dr. Vincent Marek, a former DARPA biotechnologist expelled for unethical human trials. Claire frowned. She'd heard that name years ago, in connection with Project Spectre, an experimental program rumored to test adaptive disguise materials for covert missions. The same tech Ethan had hinted at during his trial, ignored as a delusion of trauma. Rex suddenly barked, startling her. The dog stood by the window, staring down into the street. Claire followed his gaze. A black sedan idled across the road, engine running. The driver's face was obscured by a scarf and tinted glass. "You see something," she whispered. Rex growled softly. The car drove off seconds later, disappearing into the swirling snow. Claire closed the blinds and whispered to herself, "So it begins." The next morning, she drove with Rex to the site of Mason Clark's penthouse. a high-rise overlooking the frozen river. The building's lobby was sleek, sterile, glass walls, chrome elevators, and the faint scent of money. The concierge, Mrs. Helene Duval, greeted her with polite suspicion. She was a petite woman in her 50s, hair perfectly coiled, perfume heavy enough to mask fear. "Detective Monroe," she said, "I already told your people everything." Claire nodded. "I'm not here to question you, Mrs. Duval. Just revisiting the scene." Helene hesitated, glancing down at Rex. "That dog, he used to come here often. The soldier would wait outside, always talking to him like he was human." Her voice softened. "He said the dog kept him alive more than once." Claire smiled faintly. Maybe he still will. Upstairs, the penthouse was sealed off. Dust covered the marble floors, and faint traces of dried blood marked the rug. Rex sniffed around, tail flicking. Claire followed, scanning the corners. The dog suddenly pawed at the bookshelf, whining. She pulled it aside and found a small ventilation grate behind it. Inside was a thin metal shard, silver, flexible, almost skin-like. It shimmered under the flashlight. She lifted it carefully with tweezers. "What in God's name?" she muttered. Rex barked once, as if confirming her suspicion. She bagged the fragment and looked out over the snowy skyline. Somewhere out there, someone was walking around wearing Ethan Cole's face. Back at her car, Claire leaned against the hood, snow collecting on her coat. Her phone buzzed. It was a blocked number. She answered. A distorted voice came through, low and mechanical. "Detective Monroe, you're trespassing on something you don't understand. Drop the case or you'll end up like your father." The line went dead. Her grip on the phone tightened, knuckles white. She glanced at Rex, who watched her quietly, waiting. "They think threats will stop us," she said softly. The dog tilted his head, eyes unwavering. That night, she placed the strange fragment under a microscope at the lab. The analysis confirmed what she feared. It wasn't fabric. It was biopolymer, living tissue engineered with synthetic DNA, proof that someone had used an artificial face. She exhaled, heart pounding. "He was telling the truth," she whispered. Ethan Cole had been framed by ghosts, men who wore the faces of others. She looked at Rex, resting nearby. "Looks like we just made enemies, partner." Outside, the storm deepened, swallowing the city in white silence. Somewhere in the distance, a lone siren wailed, a song for the unjust. And under that sound, two souls, one woman and one dog, had just begun to uncover the darkness that men tried to bury in the snow. The blizzard returned 2 nights later, sweeping across Denver like a white tide, burying everything it touched. The city lights dimmed behind the snowfall, and the streets emptied except for the occasional echo of a siren. Detective Claire Monroe drove through the storm in her gray sedan, the windshield wipers barely keeping pace. Beside her, Rex sat upright, his ears alert, his gaze fixed on the swirling dark beyond the glass. The dog had grown quieter since their visit to Mason Clark's penthouse, as though he understood that the deeper they went, the darker it would get. Claire's mind spun through the evidence. The fragment from the crime scene had changed everything. Synthetic tissue, living DNA, and a scientist no one wanted to talk about. Dr. Vincent Marek. She parked in front of an abandoned medical complex on the city's outskirts. Snow piled against the door like a barricade, and the faded sign above the entrance read, Northview Research Institute. Claire's flashlight cut through the darkness as she entered, Rex close at her heel. The air inside smelled of rust and chemical decay. Marek worked here before DARPA shut it down, she murmured. Let's see what kind of ghosts he left behind. The corridors were lined with broken lab equipment and peeling safety posters. Claire's boots crunched on shattered glass. On a desk, she found a file labeled Spectre Trials, Human Phase. Her pulse quickened as she scanned the notes. Adaptive biopolymer structure, mimicry within 0.02% accuracy, unstable post-exposure. My God, she whispered. The experiments hadn't been canceled. They had gone underground. Rex sniffed at the air, growling low, tail stiff. A sound echoed from down the hall. Soft footsteps. Claire turned off her light, hand on her gun. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, lean, wrapped in a long wool coat dusted with snow. His face was sharp, with hollow cheeks and dark, calculating eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His beard was trimmed close, flecked with gray. "Detective Monroe," he said calmly, voice smooth but chilling. "You're trespassing." "Dr. Vincent Marek," she replied, lowering her weapon but not her guard. "You're a hard man to find." Marek smiled faintly, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. People tend to stop looking once the bodies start disappearing. His tone was almost mocking. He moved closer, studying her with clinical curiosity. "You found the fragment, didn't you? I wondered who would be smart enough to notice." Claire held his gaze. "You framed Ethan Cole." Marek's expression didn't change, but his silence was answer enough. "You think this is about one man?" he said finally. "You have no idea how small your case is compared to what's coming." Rex barked sharply, stepping forward. Marek flinched slightly at the sound, then smiled. "Still loyal, aren't you? That dog is the only reason Cole survived Afghanistan. But loyalty is a weakness, detective, and weakness gets people killed." Before Claire could respond, a crash echoed from behind her. Gunfire, sharp and close. Marek darted toward a side door, vanishing into the darkness. Claire ducked behind a pillar, returning fire toward the flash of a muzzle. Two masked men moved through the corridor, black tactical gear, no insignia. Rex lunged, taking one down with terrifying precision. The man screamed as the dog's teeth clamped onto his forearm, gun clattering to the floor. Claire fired twice, dropping the second assailant. Silence followed, broken only by Rex's heavy breathing. When she looked back, Marek was gone. She knelt beside the first man, his mask torn. Beneath it was something wrong, skin too smooth, expression too blank. She touched his cheek. It shifted slightly, like rubber under heat. She pulled back, horrified. "Synthetic," she whispered. "They're using the tech on living subjects." Rex whined softly, as if confirming it. Claire gathered what she could: hard drives, notebooks, vials marked with coded serials, then hurried out into the storm. By the time she reached her car, her fingers were numb. She drove back to the precinct, mind racing. Every instinct screamed that the truth was larger than one murder. At the lab the next morning, forensic analyst Dr. Nora Finch joined her. Nora was in her early 40s, small-framed with curly black hair and deep brown skin. Her glasses often slipped down her nose as she worked, and she spoke in quick, clipped sentences that betrayed a restless mind. "Claire," she said, examining the samples under magnification. "This isn't just biopolymer. It's fused with neural tissue, responsive material. Think camouflage that can think for itself." She looked up, expression tense. "This isn't from any civilian lab. Whoever made this has military clearance." Claire's heart sank. "Then we're not just chasing criminals. We're chasing ghosts the government forgot to bury." That evening, Captain Briggs called her into his office. The blinds were half closed, the desk littered with folders. His face was drawn, his voice low. "You've stirred up something dangerous, Claire. A federal task force wants your files. They're pulling you off the cold case." Claire stiffened. "On whose orders?" "Department of Defense," Briggs said. "They're calling it a matter of national security." She stared at him, disbelief hardening into anger. "They killed a man's life and called it security." Briggs exhaled. "You can't win this one. Walk away while you can." But Claire had seen too many graves dug for the truth to die quietly. She left the office without a word, grabbed Rex's leash, and stepped into the freezing night. Snow fell again, heavy and relentless. "We keep going," she told him. Rex's tail flicked once in answer. They returned to Northview under cover of darkness. Inside the main lab, Claire found a hidden elevator leading underground. The air below was colder, metallic. Rows of pods lined the chamber, each containing human forms suspended in a translucent fluid. Some looked alive, others not. One pod was cracked open, empty. She leaned closer to the nameplate. Subject number 7. Ethan Cole. Her breath caught. "They made a copy," she whispered. The real killer had been walking around in Ethan's image. A sudden hiss echoed through the chamber. Merrick's voice came from the intercom above. "You should have listened, Detective. Curiosity kills faster than bullets." Lights flickered red as security doors slammed shut. Claire ran, Rex close behind. She shot the control panel, forcing the exit open as alarms screamed. They emerged into the snow just as the facility erupted in flames behind them. The explosion lit the night like dawn. Claire fell to her knees in the snow, breath ragged. Rex pressed against her side, panting. She looked toward the burning ruins. "They built monsters," she whispered. "And they wore the faces of men." The storm had not stopped for 2 days. Snow fell thick as ash, blurring Denver's skyline into a pale smear of light and shadow. Detective Claire Monroe drove through the empty industrial district, her wipers scraping frozen glass. The city's power grid had started to fail in patches, whole blocks swallowed by darkness. In the passenger seat, Rex watched the road ahead, his breath fogging the window, muscles taut beneath his thick coat of fur. The explosion at Northview still echoed in Claire's ears. They had escaped with their lives, but the evidence, hard drives, samples, was gone. Someone wanted the truth buried under snow and silence. Her phone vibrated on the dashboard. It was an unknown number again. She hesitated before answering. "Detective Monroe," a voice said, female this time, low and measured. "My name is Lena Ward. I'm a journalist. You're being hunted." Claire frowned. "Everyone's a hunter lately," she replied dryly. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I worked with Mason Clark," Lena said, "and I know what Project Spectre really was." The line went dead before Claire could reply. She looked at Rex. "Looks like we're not the only ghosts left standing." Lena Ward arrived that night at an abandoned diner off Route 85. The wind screamed against the cracked windows as Claire entered with Rex. Lena sat in the back booth, her laptop open beside a half-empty mug of coffee gone cold. She was in her late 30s, tall and slim, with sharp features softened by fatigue. Her dark brown hair was pulled into a loose braid, and faint circles shadowed her hazel eyes. Eyes that spoke of too many nights spent chasing secrets. She wore a heavy wool coat and fingerless gloves, the kind reporters used when they'd given up on warmth. "You came alone," she said, her voice raspy but calm. "Good. That means you still think for yourself." Claire sat opposite her, Rex curling by her feet. "You said you knew Mason Clark," Claire began. Lena nodded. "He was my source. Mason was laundering money through dummy foundations tied to a private contractor called Black Widow Defense Systems. They funded Spectre. When he tried to back out, someone made sure he couldn't talk." She slid a flash drive across the table. "Everything I had before they erased my files. Names, transactions, coded locations. One of them might lead to Marek." Before Claire could respond, Rex lifted his head, ears pricked. A deep growl rumbled from his chest. Lena froze. Outside, headlights cut through the storm, a black SUV creeping toward the diner. "They found us," Claire hissed. Gunfire shattered the front window. Glass exploded across the booths. Lena ducked as Claire drew her pistol, firing through the doorway. Rex barked, low and fierce, as bullets chewed through the neon sign above. "Back door!" Lena shouted. The three bolted into the alley behind the diner, snow swirling like smoke. The SUV roared forward, tires spinning on ice. They ran toward the freight yard, its vast emptiness lit only by flickering sodium lamps. Trains stood silent, their steel hulls half buried under snow. Rex led the way, darting between cargo containers. Claire covered their flank, her breath burning in her throat. "Who the hell are they?" she gasped. "Black Widow enforcers," Lena said, clutching the flash drive. "They call themselves the Pale Men, the ones who do the cleanup." The first pale man appeared at the far end of the yard, a figure in a black tactical suit, face hidden behind a smooth synthetic mask that reflected the stormlight like glass. He moved with unnatural precision, silent as a machine. Another emerged behind them, then a third. "Split!" Claire ordered. Lena sprinted toward the old warehouse while Claire turned to cover her, firing 2 clean shots. One masked figure fell, but the others kept coming, unfazed by pain. Rex leapt at the nearest one, slamming him into the snow. The mask cracked under his jaws, revealing a pale, distorted face beneath, half human, half construct. "God," Claire whispered, "they're not even real anymore." Lena disappeared into the warehouse, Claire following moments later. The place smelled of oil and old metal. Rusted machinery loomed in the dark. Claire found her behind a crate, panting. "We can't stay here," she said. "The storm's masking their heat signatures, but it won't last." She spotted a derelict maintenance truck near the far door. "Move!" They broke cover and sprinted through the snow. A burst of automatic fire tore through the air, shattering pipes. Steam hissed around them, cloaking everything in mist. Rex darted ahead, barking sharply, a signal. The dog jumped onto the truck bed as Claire hot-wired the ignition. "You know how to drive in a blizzard?" Lena yelled over the gunfire. Claire grinned tightly. "I used to drift stolen patrol cars when I was 16. Hang on." The truck roared to life and fishtailed onto the street. Behind them, the SUV followed, lights cutting through the storm. The chase tore through the sleeping city, red lights flashing on snow, engines howling through frozen air. Claire swerved between abandoned cars, her breath fogging the windshield. Rex stood braced on the passenger seat, barking as gunshots cracked from behind. "They don't stop," Lena said through gritted teeth. "Then we make them stop," Claire replied. She slammed the brakes, spinning the truck sideways. The SUV skidded past. Claire fired through her window, hitting the driver. The vehicle flipped, rolling into a snowbank and erupting in flames. The blast lit the storm in orange fire, sending embers whirling into the night. Silence returned slowly, broken only by the howl of wind. Claire's hands trembled on the wheel. Lena stared at the burning wreck, expression unreadable. "They'll send more," she said quietly. "Then we'll be ready," Claire answered. They drove to an old ranger cabin in the foothills outside the city, half buried under snowdrifts. Inside, the air was cold but safe. Claire lit a fire in the stone hearth while Rex curled beside it, tail twitching as he slept. Lena plugged the flash drive into her laptop. "You need to see this," she said. The files showed encrypted communications between Marek and a Defense Department contact identified only as R. Vaughn. "He's the one funding Spectre now," Lena explained. "He doesn't just want to sell the technology. He wants to replace entire identities with programmable ones. Agents, soldiers, politicians." Claire leaned back, staring at the fire. So Ethan wasn't just a scapegoat. He was a prototype. Lena nodded grimly. "And now they'll erase anyone who knows." Outside, the storm beat against the walls, relentless and cold. Claire looked at Rex, his breathing steady, his fur glinting in the firelight. "They framed a soldier," she said softly. "Let's see how they handle a war." The fire crackled, casting long shadows across the cabin walls. Somewhere far below, the city slept beneath the snow, unaware that its reflection was already being rewritten. The dawn that broke over the Colorado Rockies was pale and brittle, a sky of glass after the long storm. The cabin where Claire Monroe, Lena Ward, and Rex had hidden was half buried in snow, its chimney coughing thin smoke into the morning air. Inside, the fire had burned low, but the three of them had not slept. The flash drive Lena brought had revealed enough to turn the snow beneath their feet into quicksand, a web of government contracts, shell corporations, and erased identities. Ethan Cole's name appeared again and again, labeled Test Subject 0. Claire sat at the wooden table, her eyes hollow from exhaustion but still sharp. "They made him the face of their experiment," she murmured. Lena looked up from her laptop, the bluish glow painting her tired features. "If that's true, there's one place left that can prove it. The data vault under the Denver biotech facility. It's run by a company called Helix Corp, but that's just Black Widow's clean name." Rex lay by the fire, ears twitching, head resting on his paws. His coat had lost some of its luster, patches of snowmelt darkening his fur, but his amber eyes remained vigilant. He had learned the scent of danger. He would not sleep while his humans planned war. Claire reached over, scratching gently behind his ear. "You ready, partner?" she whispered. The dog's tail thumped once against the floor. The plan was reckless. Helix Corp's facility sat on the edge of the frozen river that cut through downtown Denver, a fortress of glass and steel guarded by private security and federal clearance. They needed an insider. That was where Agent Thomas Raines came in, a name Lena had found in Mason Clark's old emails. Raines was a former intelligence officer turned whistleblower, mid-40s, tall and broad-shouldered, with close-cropped black hair and a face carved from discipline and regret. He had the weary eyes of someone who had buried too many truths under official silence. When Claire and Lena found him in a dim bar near Union Station, he was already drunk. "I told your friend Clark to stop digging," he muttered, voice rough like gravel. "He didn't listen. Neither will you, I guess." Claire leaned forward, her tone firm but not pleading. "They killed a soldier, framed him, and burned everything that could prove it. You were part of that project, weren't you?" Raines's jaw tightened. "I was security detail. Thought it was just prototype identity work, deepfake prevention, espionage stuff." Then I saw the clones, grown in tanks like livestock. They called them shadows. His hand trembled as he raised his glass. You can't fight them, detective. They own the light and the dark both. Claire stared at him for a long moment. Then we burned both. By nightfall, they moved. Rains drove, his old truck rattling across the icy bridge that led to the biotech complex. Snow whipped across the windshield. Claire sat in the passenger seat, checking her sidearm. Lena was in the back, laptop open, typing furiously to breach Helix Corp's security network. Once I'm in, she said, I can trigger a blackout for 5 minutes. After that, their defense system reboots and we'll be ghosts or corpses. Comforting, Claire replied dryly. Rex barked once, as if agreeing that ghosts were preferable. The facility loomed ahead, mirrored walls reflecting the storm, floodlights slicing through snow. Rains flashed an old ID at the checkpoint, the guard barely glancing before waving them through. Inside, the hallways gleamed with sterile perfection. Everything smelled faintly of bleach and ozone. Lena plugged into the main terminal while Claire and Rex moved deeper into the restricted wing. The silence there was heavy, like the air in a church. On the doors, etched labels read Genomic Simulation Lab. Personnel access, level Omega. Claire's heart pounded. She swiped the keycard Rains had given her, and the door slid open with a hiss. Inside were rows of glass tanks filled with luminescent fluid. Bodies floated within, identical faces, identical scars. Ethan Cole's face repeated down the line, dozens of him suspended like unfinished prayers. Claire's breath caught. "Oh, God," she whispered. Rex growled, low and mournful, pressing closer to her leg. She walked past the tanks, each one labeled Unit 01, 02, 03. Some of them blinked open their eyes as she passed. It wasn't life. It was imitation. They didn't just copy him, she said softly. They copied his soul's reflection. A voice came from behind her, calm and almost amused. Impressive, isn't it? She turned. Standing in the doorway was Richard Vaughn, the elusive R. Vaughn from the files. He was in his early 50s, tall, elegant, dressed in a dark tailored coat. His silver hair was slicked back, and his skin carried the smoothness of someone too used to control. Yet his eyes, cold, gray, and surgical, revealed the truth. A man who believed in power above morality. "Detective Monroe," he said, stepping closer. "You've made quite a mess. But now you see why Ethan Cole was necessary. Humanity needs faces that don't falter under scrutiny." "You turned a soldier into a weapon," Claire spat. "You destroyed a man's life." Vaughn smiled faintly. "We didn't destroy him. We perfected him." He gestured to the tanks. "Immortal, programmable, loyal. The world doesn't need heroes. It needs replacements." Claire raised her gun. "Then you'll be the first thing I erase." The lights flickered. Lena's hack had begun. Alarms blared through the corridors. Rains's voice came through the radio. 5 minutes, Monroe, get out!" Vaughn lunged for the control panel. Claire fired, the bullet grazing his shoulder. He fell, but his hand slammed the release switch. The tanks cracked open, fluid spilling across the floor. Dozens of cloned Ethans staggered forward, their movements erratic, confused. Rex barked and leapt, knocking one away as Claire grabbed Lena's hand and pulled her toward the exit. Vaughn laughed through the chaos, blood on his lips. "You can't stop evolution." They ran as explosions began tearing through the building. Rains met them at the truck, firing into the guards chasing them. "Go!" he shouted. A second later, A shock wave sent flames rolling across the night sky. The facility collapsed behind them in a thunder of glass and fire. Claire held Rex close as they sped across the bridge, the reflection of the burning city lighting his amber eyes. By morning, Denver lay quiet beneath gray clouds. The news called it a chemical fire. No one spoke of clones or conspiracies. Vaughn's body was never recovered. Claire stood with Rex at the edge of the frozen river, wind tugging at her coat. Lena approached, her breath white in the air. "We didn't erase the truth," she said softly. "We only set it free." Claire nodded. "That's enough." Rex pressed against her leg, tail brushing the snow. For the first time in weeks, she smiled. The storm had ended, but its echo would live on, in the loyalty of a dog and the courage of those who refused to look away. Sometimes God doesn't send angels in white robes. Sometimes He sends them wearing uniforms, carrying scars, or walking on four paws through the snow. Ethan's story was never just about justice. It was about faith. About how, even when the world buries you under lies, heaven can still raise you up through the loyalty of a single soul who refuses to give up. Maybe you too have faced nights where the storm never seemed to end. But remember, every storm breaks eventually. Every tear becomes part of the light that guides someone else home. And perhaps, in ways we'll never fully understand, God uses even broken soldiers and faithful dogs to remind us. Miracles still happen, often disguised as courage. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it. Let it travel farther than the snow and find someone who needs hope tonight. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what miracle you're praying for. And if you believe that God still works through loyalty, love, and second chances, subscribe to the channel so we can keep spreading these stories of faith, redemption, and the light that never dies. May God bless you, protect your home, and watch over every loyal heart still walking beside you in this life and the next.